Okay, so we're talking about defining racism, and I was thinking in the conversation with peers, and well, and with Sharon Osborne, none of the Black people ever asked, "How do you define racism?" Right? So when white people don't want to be called racist, what does being racist mean to a white person? What does it? Yeah, go ahead.
I I can help with that because I really had to unpack this with when I read Me and White Supremacy and her definition of white exceptionalism, which I thought was going to be about white people thinking that they were exceptional in terms of like achievement, but in fact it was white people feeling that racism doesn't pertain to us because we're one of the good ones.
Mhm.
And then also it was echoed by Isabel Wilkerson when she says that for white people, the term racist is radioactive, which I thought was just a great description. And it's because I think most white people, myself among them, believe that racism is only the purview of those who state anywhere on the spectrum from suspicion, prejudice, animosity, contempt, hatred towards Black people or people of another race. And so for those of us who have never expressed verbally or consciously or in our hearts
Mhm.
those feelings, it's we have not identified as participants in racism or even having an understanding of racism beyond that very narrow definition.
Mm.
So now what I've learned for myself is that I've benefited from, that I'm privileged by, that I live with a level of comfort, even though I'm the lowest on the socioeconomic scale. I still live with great privilege and benefit from a system that privileges me and my caste because my skin is white, which I didn't understand before all of this.
Mm.
Yeah, I probably, had you asked me or had we talked about this a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have no idea how to define that, and I wouldn't have understood, same as Margo, that I've received certain benefits because of for being white. Um, and I would say I'm stuck on this proximity to power thing because I feel like there's prejudice. I think that prejudice can exist beyond whiteness,
Yeah.
but but racism sort of combines prejudice with a position of power,
Mhm.
or being in the upper caste, in the dominant caste. And so I don't know, I could be totally wrong, but I don't know, while you can be prejudiced, I don't know, unless you are have that proximity to power, combine that with prejudice, that's racism.
Yeah.
So I don't know that if you're not in the dominant caste, like maybe they're not totally mutually exclusive, but can you be racist? You can still have prejudice, but maybe you're not racist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's what that's like that's what people like Carrington Jackson Razuk, she's a yoga teacher, and she's um she's white, but she's a white middle. I don't know. She's, if when you look at her, she looks white, and she said, "I'm racist. It's proximity to power. I'm working to be anti-racist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm prejudiced." Like my parents, as I talk about white people now and white women, my mom's like, when did you start hating white women? I'm like, all of these white women are my friends. No, I don't. And I actually said, I hate everybody. I said, I'm not, I do. They have to earn people. I'm at the point where I hate everybody, and people I like have earned my trust. So that's a better way of, well, I hate Black people. I hate everybody. I shouldn't.
Socks that say that.
Yeah, but I agree. I mean, I'm prejudiced. I have prejudices. We all have prejudices as human beings. But I also think, since race didn't exist before white men created it. So and white people created this system of race in order to oppress other people. Right? So, it's
And
your
that's a really good way to
system.
that's a really good way to explain it, because I've had these conversations with people and they don't understand. They just don't agree with me.
Yeah. I think if you give other options, it's like, as a human being, everyone is prejudiced.
Mm-hmm.
But, white people created that's why
Yeah.
yeah. That's why I feel like figuring out how to define racism and what it means to an individual when we're having interracial conversations, I feel like that has to be set in in order to discuss. Does that make sense?
Like if you're going to be in conversation about it, define what you're having the conversation about.
Well, define what it means, yeah, but define, like, if we're talking about this thing that's called a carrot, but I'm thinking of an apple and you're thinking of an orange,
Mm-hmm.
we're not talking about the same thing. And I feel like until we define, that carrot and agree that that's what the carrot is, I feel like that's where the disconnect is when it comes to
Well,
race.
I think part of the problem is that the carrot was grown in soil, and so the carrot isn't freestanding, and that we become very fixated on our individual, identity. So yes, like with the royals, well, they're not racist. They invited her into Buckingham Palace to be a part of the family. Yes, they did, but on very narrow terms. It's like being the house slave
Yeah.
or something, right? Or like, yes, there's people in the house, but they can't use the front door, and they can't speak up. Like, what was it I was watching that was so incredible? Oh, One Night in
Miami, I
You
was.
know, I
Who was
mean,
that?
that scene was fantastic. And then when he got up and said, well, you can't come in the house.
Mhm.
And like, how do you reconcile here's this man who clearly has a depth of loyalty and affection and love. And
Well,
you
he's
think,
a star. Then this is God, Margo, this is brilliant. He's a star. He was Jim Brown. He was fucking white women. he was the one who really loved the white women in the 60s.
Mm.
And when he went home, and they adored him, wouldn't let him in the house to move furniture.
Yeah, to help
To
out.
help.
Yeah, that was like,
We don't let niggers in the house.
that was insane.
So that's like, I mean, that's exactly what Isabel Wilkerson talks about, is just like how this hurts everybody. Now the white dude doesn't have anybody to help him.
But you've got to look beyond yourself. You've got to look at the bigger picture. And I think that's what so many white people are unwilling or incapable of doing. Because, especially in America, because we're so fixated on our individual identity, you know, we can't see beyond our own exceptionalism.
That was created by other people doing the work for free and getting, um, getting support. Like this bill that's just been passed, they did this during the Depression for white people, giving these loans, giving the GI Bill, enabling colleges, having state colleges. Now they're doing that for everyone, right? So you can't call folks lazy. Like I've just been really thinking about, as I work on having more grace towards Black men who are selling drugs, thinking about if there had been affordable housing, access to healthcare, food,
Education and resources.
education, but even if there was food, housing, it would, and like it would they, and a basic living wage, would they need to sell drugs? Yes, there would be some, because there's always greed in communities. But how many of those guys that are out on the street are just there? Definitely the education piece too. But I'm just thinking about, access to housing and food. Would they be out there? So
Right. Well, but, and so two things. One, I don't know what the statistics are on this, but, and maybe even now more than ever, I think there is an equatable amount of white men selling drugs, but people looking the other way. And then, yeah, like even before in the 80s and the crack and cocaine disparity and epidemic, it was illegal for Black men or women to hold certain jobs.
Yeah.
And to make a certain wage. And even if they could hold the same job, they made a lower wage. So yeah, like there was no resources. So what is one to do?
Yeah. It's a brilliant system. I think also that what needs to be done is to really like step back and be like, because Black people are like, damn. Like when I read the shit that white people come up with, like we're not even I wouldn't even think to do some, when I look at some of the punishments that they would do, it's like,
that's what freaks me out.
It's like, how would you even think to even do that?
Yeah. So that's what freaks me out about like humanity, is just like all this was created on false science. It was created in an illusion for free labor. And then what is so scary to me is how do you dehumanize another human so much that you are able to come up with that type of torture? And actually, so I was going to say this before, but I didn't say it, but I wonder if that type of like evil that is in white people's DNA is part of the cause of the like opioid epidemic, like people trying to like numb the pain. They're not even conscious of it, but numb the pain of like the ancestral and evil trauma that has been perpetuated for whatever, 300 years. Yeah. I wonder if that's part of the depression and the substance abuse of, it's really across the spectrum, but all white folks.
Yeah. Also of like, how there's rich white people who are never happy.
Right.
and like, older white men who go through all these wives and do all these different things and always are continually having younger wives. I would, I think that's, ladies, I think that's the next like realm of therapy, because I don't think that the way talk therapy works, I mean, I haven't had much, so I'm just talking out of my head, I don't know. But I think that's the next level of what therapeutic practices will be through embodiment. And in the Good Ancestor book, I can't remember who wrote it, but she talks about, the healing that we do, it goes back 7 generations and forward 7 generations.
Mm.
So I think that, like we were talking about off the call, we were talking about like how this is affecting me doing the book club with you guys. I feel like maybe this is part of me healing my ancestors' trauma, and you healing your, like, we're doing it together 7 generations back, and we're helping 7 generations forward. So I think that's why I feel good after our calls.
That's a comforting thought.
I'm going to end the recording there.